Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Liz Rutledge, Director of Wildlife Resources at the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. Thank you for attending tonight's webinar, which is part of the 15 webinar series, Learn to Deer Hunt. This series offers a dynamic lineup of presentations and materials curated by the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program, which covers a wide variety of topics to guide new deer hunters from preseason scouting all the way to processing. The series is hosted and moderated by the North Carolina Wildlife Federation in conjunction with the South Wake Conservationist chapter. And so we'll go over just some general housekeeping real quickly. We ask that everyone stay muted throughout the webinar until we have the question and answer session at the end. Also, this webinar is being recorded for future use, so please turn off your camera if you do not wish to be seen on the video recording. We ask that you either put any questions that you have in the chat box throughout the presentation, which we'll read during the Q&A session, or you may raise your hand to be called on during the Q&A session. And to raise your hand, there is a hand sign in the top right corner of your screen. So just let us know in the chat box if you need any help with that. All right, so I'll take a couple minutes to give you a little bit of background on Wildlife Federation programming related to R3, retention, recruitment, and reactivation. First of all, academics afield. The Wildlife Federation has partnered with NC State, the Wildlife Resources Commission, and other conservation groups to build upon current R3 programming and to introduce college students from non-traditional backgrounds to hunting and shooting sports. And we have Getting Started Outdoors, which is a partnership between the Wildlife Federation and the Wildlife Resources Commission. It provides an all-day educational workshop and one-on-one deer hunting mentoring opportunities for participants. For those interested in wildlife and conservation policy issues, the Wildlife Federation has the CAMO Coalition, which is a listserv to keep members up to date on policy specifically geared toward hunters and anglers. Artemis is a National Wildlife Federation program that the North Carolina Wildlife Federation promotes to uplift women in sporting and conservation to provide small group hunting and mentoring opportunities for females, if that's something you may be interested in. The Wildlife Federation is proud to host tonight's webinar series in conjunction with the New Hill Education and Mentoring Program and additional partners who are contributing the educational content for these webinars that we're able to bring to you all. In addition, Wildlife Federation volunteers, Guy and Judy Gardner, partner with the Wildlife Resources Commission to provide skill-based seminars consisting of Deer Hunting 101 and From Field to Freezer Deer Processing. These are open to the public and they usually occur in September if that's something of interest to you. The Wildlife Federation also works directly with North Carolina Hunters for the Hungry to facilitate the donation of hunter-harvested deer to feed the hungry across the state. All right, so the seminar series was curated by the New Hill Education and Mentoring Program and the facilitating partners listed on the slide. The webinars are for adults new to hunting and include practical topics to explore the ins and outs of hunting and enhance your overall outdoor experience. Please see the New Hill Education and Mentoring Program Facebook page for more information on field opportunities. And so let's get right to it. I'm happy to introduce our guest speaker for this evening, Brian Padgett. I'll provide a little bit of background on our speaker and then I'll let him introduce the webinar topic for this evening. A lifelong hunter and shooting enthusiast, Brian Padgett has been involved in hunter education and training for over 10 years. During this time, Brian has taught hunter education courses and has worked with national and state organizations to help recruit and mentor new hunters through seminars, field days, and mentored deer camps. Brian is currently serving as a founding member and senior mentor of the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program. So let's welcome Brian here, and I will get him unmuted here in just a second.
Liz. Well, yes, today we are going to talk about tree identification for the deer hunter. And hopefully some of the information that we provide today will encourage you to maybe help you learn enough that you'll be encouraged to start down your own path, because learning to identify trees and some of the different species that that inhabit our forests. It's absolutely a lot of fun. Now, to start off with, before we get into identification of specific trees, I want to talk to you a little bit about how trees are critical to wildlife, because they provide a ton of benefits that it may not be apparent to most. Number one, obviously, they are an extremely good source of food. A lot of our species of oak trees and, for example, supply acorns, which most of you are probably familiar with. Acorns are a tremendous source of nutrition for wildlife of all types. As a matter of fact, at the bottom of the slide, you'll see a really fun fact. It's not just deer that key on acorns. There are over 100 species of vertebrate animals that are known to consume acorns. So a tremendously important source of food. And you've also got soft mass such as apple, plum, persimmon. And a lot of animals love to eat the leaves and buds that trees provide. Obviously, you've also got shelter sources, and that can include both living and dead trees. The cavities, for example, serve as perfect dens for animals such as squirrels and raccoons. And the dead snags are used by a range of animals, from birds to small mammals. And finally, cover. Cover is absolutely essential. All types of animals use trees, both living and dead, for cover, as well as a source of nutrients. So really just a tremendous amount of benefits that trees serve, not just deer, but all wildlife. Now, as a hunter, some people may have some background knowledge of plant identification, but I'm here to tell you that you don't have to be a botanist or a naturalist to learn how to identify trees. All it takes is a little bit of elbow grease, to be honest with you. There are a range of, if you're just starting out, there are a range of resources that you can use to actually help guide you down this path. For example, books, including some of the smaller, easy to carry books that you can carry afield with you. These are great sources. Two of the ones on this slide are very common. The Peterson Field Guides at the very bottom. I have a copy of that goes everywhere with me. I usually keep it in the truck. And there's also now, and I haven't had a lot of luck with these, but I know that there are a lot of smartphone apps you can actually use. I'm still testing various apps, so if anybody on the call finds one they really like, feel free to shoot me an email, or I'd love to hear about it. But one thing that does help when you're learning to identify trees is a little bit of background knowledge about botanical terms can serve you a world of good. And I'm actually going to focus on some of that, some of the terms in the slideshow tonight, some of the things that you need to know, some of the background information you need when you're using different keys to identify trees. I do want to specifically point out two really good websites that, man, these are absolutely ideal. The first one is the North Carolina Tree Identification website. This is put out by NCSU. Now, it does require a certain knowledge of botanical terms, but again, even the beginner can learn those terms and how to use them, and with a very small amount of work. And the Virginia Tech Dendrology Keys. I actually love it. It's a fantastic tool. And again, it does require that you understand a few basic terms, but once you get the hang of it, it's just addictive. So these are just some sources of where you can learn some more information. So what I want to do next is get started with some of the terminology that you need to be familiar with before you start learning how to identify trees. So the very first thing that you'll hear about is alternate versus opposite leaf arrangements. And on the slide here on the left, and Liz, can you see my pointer when I'm actually moving this on the slide?
Yes.
Yes. This is an alternate leaf arrangement. Alternate means that one leaf, you have one leaf per node. So you see how this leaf right here has one node, and you've got a separate leaf down here at another node. That's what an alternate leaf arrangement is. One leaf per node, and the leaves alternate. So you've got one on this side, and then it alternates to this side, and then you've got another one up here. That's an alternate leaf arrangement. And in this case, it's an oak. And over here, you've got an opposite leaf arrangement where you have, opposite is where you have 2 leaves per node, and the leaves are directly opposite one another. So you can see you've got 2 here, and you've got 2 up here, and it's completely different than the alternating pattern up here. So that's the first thing you need to learn when you're looking at keys to learn how to identify trees. Is it an alternate leaf arrangement, or is it an opposite? And that's fairly easy. Now, you'll also hear about the lobe itself. Is it pinnately lobed or palmately lobed? Well, the difference between those two terms, a pinnately lobed leaf, the easiest way to remember this is if you look at this vein going up the leaf, a pinnately lobed leaf has one main vein that extends from the base of the leaf all the way up to the top of the leaf. And then it's got a lot of smaller veins that kind of branch off of the main vein. So that's a pinnately lobed leaf. In this case, it's a white oak. Over here, you have a sweet gum that's a palmately lobed leaf. And now a palmately lobed leaf is one that has several main veins that radiate from a central point. About right here, you can see you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 major veins that radiate from this central point. So you can think about it, it's almost like your hand. You've got the 5 fingers that reach out, and then you've got smaller veins that break off of these. So that's the difference between a pinnately lobed. Again, the main vein goes all the way up, and then you've got palmately lobed, which the main veins radiate from a single point. So when you are looking at keys, both of these, alternate versus opposite and pinnately versus palmately, will be discussed. And if you understand that, you'll be able to follow the plant keys. Now, the other thing that you'll hear about is simple versus compound leaves. On the left here, and this is another type of oak, this is actually the pin oak. This is a simple leaf. Now, a simple leaf has a leaf right here that has one, this is the blade. It's got one blade that's attached to the twig right here by a petiole. There's your petiole right here where the actual leaf joins the twig. So again, the simple leaf has one blade that's attached to the twig by a petiole. And then over here with the compound leaf, you've actually got several leaflets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've got multiple leaflets that attach to the petiole. So you can see, again, simple is one blade attached to the twig by a petiole versus compound that has several leaflets, several leaflets that attach to the petiole. So again, it doesn't take a lot of basic terminology for you to get started. And pictures help a tremendous amount when you're trying to determine tree species. As a matter of fact, some of the really good tree keys, even if you don't know the terminology that well, if you look really good at pictures of leaves and bark, you can actually go a long way toward narrowing down what you're looking at. So now that we've discussed a little bit about terminology, I want to talk a little about some specific tree species that benefit wildlife and deer. And I'm going to start off with the oaks, because oaks, especially the white oak, they are the ones that hunters key in on the most, but they're far from the only species that I want to introduce you to today. To begin with the oaks, I think you need to understand the difference between a white oak and a red oak, because these are two main groups of oaks. Now, within the white oak group, there are several species, and within the red oak group, they also have multiple species. But to understand the difference between the two major groups, what I've done is I've put together a slide that kind of shows you some of the highlights you need to know. Let's start off with the white oak group over here on the left. If you're looking at a white oak, the leaves of white oaks usually have rounded lobes. So you can see the lobes here are kind of gently rounded. And if you look on the acorns, the inner surface of the acorn cap, if you take off the cap of the acorn, it's going to be hairless or nearly so. And the really big thing about white oaks is it takes one full growing season for the acorns to mature. Now, if you compare that to the red oaks over here, you can see they have very pointed lobes. They're not rounded like the white oak group. They have pointed lobes. And if you look very closely on the, you can't see it in this picture, but at the very tip, there's small bristles on the tips. And if you take the acorn cap off of one of these, the inner surface of the acorn cap is covered in tiny hairs. But the biggest difference between the two is right here. Remember the white oaks, the acorns mature in one season. Red oaks generally take at least 2 seasons for those acorns to mature. So a big difference between the white oak and red oak groups there. Now down here at the bottom, if you were to look at the acorn characteristics from the white oak group versus the red oak group, you'll see that right here, tannins. The white oaks as a group are very low in tannins. And that's important because that makes them very attractive to deer. Deer love, if they have a preference, it's going to be your white oaks because they're low in tannins. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the red oaks are bad. As a matter of fact, if you look, red oaks are a very good source of protein and fats, and they're also very, very beneficial for wildlife. But because of the low tannin content in your white oaks, these are going to be the preferred oaks. Now, as we're going to find out a little bit later, both the white and the red oak are very valuable for wildlife. And there's a key that you'll have to remember. If you most of the hunters that have been doing this a while will realize a trend here. White oaks, they might be available early in the season, but as quick as they hit the forest floor, they're not going to last long. Number one, they germinate really fast, and number two, almost everything has a target out for those white oak species when they start dropping acorns. So they're going to be gone by the time late hunting season rolls around. Well, guess what? A lot of those red oaks will still be available on the forest floor and still serve as a good source of nutrition. So let's get to know some of the different species. And we're going to have a few white oaks in our presentation as well as red oaks so you can see some of the major species. And we're going to start off with Quercus alba, the white oak. Now, don't get confused. White oak is a group that includes Quercus alba, which is known as the white oak, but this is not the only white oak species. Now, Quercus alba is probably, that's the species, that's the quintessential deer acorn right there. That most hunters are probably able to tell you what a white oak looks like. And if you know how to identify your white oak trees, you're in good shape. These things, when they have acorns on the ground, that is going to be target number one for deer. Now, white oaks themselves, they are the predominant hardwood of the East, and mature trees can be fairly big, 50 to 100 feet tall. They can live for hundreds of years. They are a very tolerant species, capable of living in low-lying areas as well as high, dry ridges. And you'll find them in both acidic and alkaline soils. Now, as we discussed, this is a member of the white oak group, so the leaves are going to be lobed. They're not going to be really pointed. And you'll see that this is that pinnately lobed configuration we were talking about, where you've got the main vein that goes all the way from top to bottom, and it branches off from that main vein. Now, here's what you need to key on. The acorns from the white oak start to drop in mid-September to mid-October. And due to that low tannin level, they're going to be really highly desirable to deer. So you want to target these white oaks early in the fall hunting season. And one of the key things to watch for when you're scouting before the season starts is if you observe these white oaks in the late summer, identify which trees have acorns and monitor for droppage. Finding acorns during the drop is the key to success. Now, identifying trees by leaves is one way to learn your trees, but you also need to learn how to identify by bark. And this next slide will show you what the bark of a white oak looks like. The bark is typically very straight patterned, as you'll see in this picture right here. It kind of is grayish in color. And it can be halfway up the tree, it can become rather platey in appearance that you see over here. So you've kind of got plates that kind of look like overlapping scales. Now, the easiest way to identify is when leaves are on the tree, because then you can use the bark to key in on. But if you're not quite sure that you're identifying it by bark, you can easily look at the leaves, and that will give you some additional assistance. It's a lot harder to identify tree species once those leaves have dropped and you don't have that context clue to use. So this is what the bark of a white oak looks like. And again, you find yourself in an area with a lot of really mature oaks, white oaks that are dropping. That is an area that's going to be frequented by tons of different wildlife. Now, the next species we're going to look at is also in the white oak group. This is the swamp chestnut oak. And you can see the very curvy waves of the leaves. It's not real pointed like a red oak would be. But there's some definite differences between the swamp chestnut oak versus the white oak we just looked at. Although they're both members of the white oak group, these things, the swamp chestnut oak has an acorn that's much larger. Now, again, like white oaks, of all of the white oak species, this acorn is low in tannin, so it's going to be very desirable for deer, but it's rather large. The cap on this extends about 1/3 of the way down to the acorn. It has wedge-shaped scales on it. And the leaves are huge. They can be up to about 11 inches long, and they have wavy, rounded teeth on them. They have, just like the white oak we just looked at, it is also pinnately lobed. You can see that main vein here. And these things also get very large, 60 to 80 feet high, and can live for hundreds of years. So very similar to the white oak, but they have a completely different leaf. Once you get imprinted once you have this imprinted in your mind, it's a unique shape. They should be fairly easy to spot. With a little bit of time, you'll be able to spot swamp chestnuts with no problem. Now, what does the bark look like? Well, on the swamp chestnut oak, notice this picture right here. This is a really good picture. You'll notice that swamp chestnut oaks, for the first 20 to 40 feet, which you'll see about right here, you don't have a lot of branches, but once they start, they're going to start relatively high. This is covered right here. So, and they usually form a rather sharp angle. So they'll come up and form a relatively narrow crown. This is actually a really good picture of what a swamp chestnut oak usually looks like. So you won't see a lot of branches until fairly high up the tree. They form a fairly narrow canopy. That's a dead giveaway for a swamp chestnut. The bark is it's typically straight. It can be scaly and loose, and it's grayish in color. But what about the acorns? When do they drop? Well, generally right after the white oak. So these acorns drop in late September and October, a few weeks after the white oak, which was Quercus alba. Now, the one thing about the swamp chestnuts is they usually have a really heavy drop every 3 to 5 years. And that heavy drop, that can be hugely beneficial to wildlife. In between those heavy drops, you typically have either a light or a moderate drop. Now, at the very bottom, I did try to put a fun fact here. This tree is also known as the basket oak because the wood from this species, it actually can be split into very long strips and used to weave baskets. So again, this is another one of our white oak group. Let me back up one slide. Again, you'll see the acorns are fairly light in color. They're low in tannin and very highly desirable for deer. As quick as they hit the ground, they're going to be a target. Now, let's take a look at a red oak. In this case, the southern red oak, Quercus falcata. And you can see a dramatic difference between the red oak versus the two white oak species we just looked at. Number one, you can see they're very sharp. They don't have those gentle lobes. They're sharp on the end. Now, the southern red oak is also a fairly large tree. They can get up to 90 feet high, and they have a broad, round crown. They can be found on dry hills, but they can also be found in streams along fertile bottoms. So you'll find them in a lot of different environments. They're found on higher ridges, usually in the coastal plain, but they're also throughout the North Carolina Piedmont. The leaves themselves, which you see a pretty good picture here, they're fairly long, 8 to 12 inches long, and they're deeply lobed. You can see this deep lobe here. They have usually 3 to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lobes, and they've got a U-shaped bill right here. This looks like a bell curve. It's a U-shaped curved base. Now, as far as the leaf itself, it's also pinnately lobed, just like the white oak. You can see that main vein going here, and it's alternate. Kind of hard to see in this picture, but you see one leaf coming off right here. Here's the other one right here. Here's the other one right here, so it's alternate as well. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the acorns of red oak species, now they are desirable for wildlife, but they do have higher tannin levels than white oaks. So they're not going to be as desirable. As a result, some of these can lie on the ground all winter. And that's the key. Those white oak species are going to be gone relatively soon. And later in the season, especially late in the winter, some of those red oaks will still be left. So what am I going at with this? If you've got a piece of property that you own or that you hunt on that has a mixture of red and white oaks, that's absolutely fantastic. You got the best of both worlds. Now, the acorns themselves of the southern red oak, this is a pretty good picture. They're orangish brown with a very thin cap that covers less than a third of the nut. Now, the bark on the southern red oak, it can be very dark in color. I put these pictures up for a reason, to show you some of the differences. I mean, this looks a lot different than this at first glance, but you'll learn that some of these have darker bark than others, but there are some commonalities to look for. Number one, the bark is, it appears to be broad with scaly ridges, and then it's separated by these deep furrows. I'm seeing if I can run my pointer down this furrow here to show you that. These are very deep furrows that are typical, that are typical of the bark. Excuse me, there we go. I touched the slide too hard. So you can see these deep furrows in the bark right here. Okay, the next species that we're going to take a look at is the water oak. Now, water oaks, not as large as certainly the white oak and the chestnut oak, but they still can be fairly large trees, 50 to 80 feet high. These are fairly common, and you'll commonly find these in areas where flooding occurs in short periods, but they can also be found on slopes with drier soils. The leaf kind of looks like, that's the best way to think of it. The leaf looks like a spatula. As the oaks, all the other oaks we've been talking about, they are alternate, and they are also pinnately, you can see that main vein going all the way up. That's a common characteristic. But they're very much, the leaves themselves are much smaller. They're only 2 to 4 inches long. And the acorns themselves are also very small. Right here, you can see that they're only about a ½ inch in size. They do have a flat scale cap that covers about a third of the acorn, and you still see that light color. That's what Quercus nigra, which is the water oak, that's what the acorn looks like. And generally, these acorns, if you have water oaks, they're going to be available from generally September through November. But like the other red oak, the rest of the red oak group, they are high in tannins. They're not going to be as preferred as the white oak species. Now, with regard to the bark for the water oak, the bark, I like to think of it, it's kind of smooth when it's young, but as the tree ages, it develops wide scaly ridges with age. So you can see the wide scaly ridges over here, and it can be a little bit smoother when it's young. It's brownish gray in appearance and almost becomes grayish black with age. It is, interestingly enough, a fairly weak wood. It's somewhat vulnerable to limb breakage. So you get a lot of root and or trunk rot with this particular species. And just an interesting fact that I wanted to put on here. If you have a fully mature water oak, a fully mature water oak tree can produce enough oxygen in one day for 2 people. So that gives you an idea, and that's just one tree. It gives you an idea how important these things are for the environment as a whole. So not just the food, not just the shelter, not just the cover we talked about earlier, but you've also got oxygen. That's always a good thing. Now, I also want to focus on, we've been talking about acorns a lot, and I don't want to just focus solely on that. And I know there's no way in a 1-hour presentation I can, cover a tremendous amount of species. My goal tonight is simple. I want to introduce enough concepts to you guys to get your interest up so that you'll go out and learn to identify trees on your own. But I do want to cover some of the soft mass species because it's not all about acorns, although a lot of hunters seem to think it is. You also have soft mast that forms they're tremendously important for a range of species as well. And I want to take a look at a few of the species that you probably need to be familiar with. And we're going to start off with the persimmon. Now, persimmons, it's often called the common persimmon or the American persimmon. These are about 60 feet tall when they're fully mature. That would be a big tree. And they can grow in, they're usually grow in well-drained soils. And they can be found, they are native to North Carolina and can be found in all areas of the state. Now, if you do have persimmon on your property, count yourself very lucky because these are absolutely deer love them. The leaves, which you see right here, they're about 2 to 6 inches long, and they're simple leaves with the smooth edges. You can have some serrations on them. They're ovate to elliptical in shape, and you can see this is a really good picture. You can see that alternate leaf arrangement. You've got one leaf here, one petiole here. You've got the leaf blade here. You've got one here. You've got one alternating here and here. So again, this is alternate leaf arrangement, just like the oaks. The fruit, down here you can see the yellow to orange fruit. That's going to be on your female trees. That's going to be 1 to 3 inches long and about 1 to 3 inches wide. And again, the deer absolutely love the fruit. And that fruit is usually going to be available December through January. And the deer will also, and not only deer, but other wildlife will browse on the leaves and twigs as well. So it pays to know as many different tree species as you can and what their food sources are and what their availabilities are. Then you can start putting the big picture together. Okay, my white oaks are going to be available early in the year. Then the red oaks are going to be more plentiful during the later part of the year. If you mix in things like soft mass, like persimmons, that's even more availability for wildlife. So if you've got a piece of property that has lots of different species with lots of different food sources, that's a very good property for wildlife. Now the bark is kind of hard to miss. Once you see a persimmon face to face, it's hard to forget. It has a distinctive gray bark that it looks like cobblestones. This is a great picture, and it kind of looks like these little cobblestones that have been put together. Once you go up to a persimmon and touch it and memorize it, you're going to be able to spot these things very easily. You'll notice that they have very deep furrows that divide the smaller blocks. So you can see some of these deep furrows in here. Kind of an interesting bark. I think it's very unique. So they're very easy to identify, even in the winter, I think it stands out from other trees. Now, persimmons are actually dioecious, which means they have separate male and female trees, which is a rather unique fact for the persimmon. And the fruit, when it's soft and ripe, it can be actually eaten raw. I know I don't like persimmon myself, but I know a lot of people that absolutely love them. However, they must be fully ripe to be sweet. But I wanted to show you definitely the persimmon because looking at the fruit, now when the fruit's on the tree, they're going to be a dead giveaway. But what you have to learn is how to identify the leaf and the bark so that you'll know, yep, you got some persimmon on the property, and certainly they should be protected and encouraged to, that's encouraged to grow. I would hate for somebody to cut down persimmon not knowing what it was. Another beneficial tree to wildlife is the southern crabapple. Here you can see most people, when they think crabapple, they immediately think of the actual fruit itself. This is a small to medium-sized native tree. They can reach up to about 30 feet in height. They're found pretty much all over North Carolina, but they're scattered locations, and you're primarily going to see them in the coastal plain and the southern mountains. They're fairly rare in the Piedmont, although you can find them in the Piedmont. Where can you find them? Well, wet forested areas are usually where you're going to see these. The leaves, if you look at the leaf of a southern crabapple, they're elliptical with a wavy, you can see that here a little bit. They have a wavy sawtooth margin. You can see it even better on this leaf here. And the mature leaves can be either green, yellow, or red. You can't really tell with this picture, but they also have an alternate leaf arrangement, just like the oaks that we looked at previously. The flowers, if you see the flowers, that's another dead giveaway, but the only issue with that is the flowers bloom in a relatively small portion of the year, April to May. But when they do come out, they're these beautiful pink blooms with about 5 petals. The fruit itself is very small, only about an inch in diameter, but they're extremely abundant, and everything loves to eat southern crabapple. Birds, mammals of all types, deer, just a really beneficial tree to have on your property. This one, I must admit, until recently, we didn't really realize how much deer like these things. I've got a buddy of mine that noticed that the honey locust, these seed pods that fall, deer absolutely love them. So that's something that kind of surprised me as well. Honey locusts, now they might not be your most highly preferred deer browse, but deer do eat them. The pods, the bean pods, are readily eaten by a number of animals, not only deer, but raccoons, squirrels, hogs, possums. A number of animals will eat these seed pods. Now, honey locusts, this is a unique tree. They're very large. They grow from 60 to 80 feet tall, and they usually have a large spreading crown. And honey locusts are not hard to identify. Right here, the second bullet point, the trunk and branches have stout thorns, and these thorns can be up to 3 inches long. In the next slide, you'll actually see what one of the thorns looks like. Now, honey locusts are found in scattered locations throughout North Carolina, but you're usually going to run into these along old roads, road beds, or old fields where there might have been a previous dwelling or some type of someone may have had a homestead. The leaves themselves are 7 to 8 inches long, and they're compound leaves. Now, these are compound leaves. You can see that there's several leaflets that join the twig right here at the petiole. And they have dark green oval leaflets. Now, the bean pods themselves, they kind of look like a corkscrew shape. Once you see the bean pod, you'll never forget it. And they're up to 18 inches long. These are very long pods. It's kind of hard to see perspective in the picture, but they are fairly long. The pods themselves, they appear in the summer, and usually they usually fall off in the autumn or early winter. And this next slide, here you can see a squirrel at a buffet line with one of these seed pods. So that's visual proof that animals do love these things. And here, I don't know if you can see that, a little dark, but this is a whitetail that actually is munching down on one as well. Here you can see those spikes I was telling you about, 3 inches long. They can be very painful spike. I mean, they're significant spikes. The bark is going to be a dark gray or brown, and it's divided in narrow flat plates. And again, the thorns are usually a dead giveaway. Now, most hunters, again, automatically key in on oaks. But what I wanted to show you with just a brief presentation is there's a lot of species that can benefit wildlife. It's not all about oaks. And the more time you spend in the woods just learning for yourself, you'd be surprised how many different sources of nutrition is out there for deer. Again, you've got multiple species that provide a range of benefit to wildlife, and the best way to do that is to get out there, bring yourself a guide, and learn on your own. If you hunt in different areas of the country, that brings another challenge. I like to hunt out west from time to time, and I find myself in areas that, you know, I had the luxury of growing up in North Carolina. I went to grad school and undergrad both in North Carolina, and most of my tree species identification efforts have been here. Well, when you go to a different part of the country, you get to learn a whole different group of players, and it can be really addictive. So I encourage you, when you get a chance, to get out, take a field guide with you, and learn as much as you can. You'd be surprised how fast you can pick this up. So Liz, I think we're finished. I'll be glad to answer any questions that might come up.
Fantastic, Brian. A lot of great information. And I know we had one question in the chat box earlier. And that was, let me pull this up here. It was a question about tannins. Could you explain a little bit more what a tannin is for us?
Sure, I'll be glad to. That's actually a great question. I might need to put that in the slide the next time so I can give you a little bit of background on that. But when you have when I mentioned the white oaks are low in tannins, tannins are basically a class of a biomolecule in acorns, and it's basically, you hear tannins mentioned a lot in association with oak trees. So tannin compounds, now it's not just oak trees, tannin compounds are widely distributed in many different types of plants, but they play a role in protection from predation in some cases. So you can almost think of high tannins being leading to less desirable for predation. Now, as far as food properties, tannins, what's the easiest way to say this? Products like white oaks that have very low doses of tannins are simply going to be more desirable for wildlife than those that have more accumulation of the tannin. I hope that answers a little bit of your question, but it is a biomolecule, and the more tannin you have in your acorn, the less desirable it's going to be.
I think that explains it pretty well. I think it comes down to taste, right? Some of them just taste better than others than with fewer tannins. We also have another question here in the chat box. Can you tell us about chestnuts in regard to deer? I see them on public land. Green fur on the ground where I. So any thoughts about chestnuts?
Chestnuts are good. A lot of different wildlife species like chestnuts as well. I didn't center on chestnuts because, well, in the mountains you may run into more chestnut. But yes, if you do have chestnuts available, that's certainly a good species. Like I said, the slideshow we put together tonight was just focusing on some of the major players, but there are a range of different species that can offer benefits to wildlife. And chestnuts are don't get that confused with the chestnut oak, because those are two different things. Chestnut oak and chestnuts are two completely different animals. But both the chestnut oak and the chestnut are actually a benefit to wildlife. So definitely, yeah, if you have those on your property, that's a great source as well. Obviously, the one that gets all the press and the attention is the white oak, and for good reason. The white oak is the most predominant species. It's going to be found pretty much all over the state in large numbers. That's what most people key on, but I hope tonight's presentation showed you that it's not just about that one species.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions? Any more in the chat box? Any raised hands? All right. As usual, we've got a quiet bunch here tonight, so I'll just give everybody another second or two just to think of anything they might want to ask Brian real quick before we start wrapping up.
Okay, sure.
Okay, we've got a question here in the chat box. Is there an app that's good, that is a good field guide?
I'll be honest with you, I'm still old school. I like to use my Peterson's guide. Now, I did try one app. I'm not going to tell you the name of it because I was not impressed, and I don't like to pass on products that don't. I did try one app for my phone. I downloaded it and found out that I got bombarded by hundreds of ads, and that was a turnoff for me. Now, that being said, I think this is a fairly new thing. I'm still on the search for an app that I can use on my phone. I've heard of some apps that you can actually take a picture of a leaf and get a fairly instant classification for species for you. That would be a wonderful tool, but I haven't used one myself that I can endorse. I am still old school a bit. I like to take my field guides with me. A good picture guide is hard to beat, but certainly keep an eye out on these apps, because if we can find one that's doesn't cost a fortune and doesn't bombard you with ads, I can see that being very worthwhile.
Okay, and in our chat box, we've had some people say Plant Snap, iNaturalist. So it looks like there are a few different ones. Plant Net.
I think that iNaturalist, we had mentioned that right here. iNaturalist by National Geographic. I haven't used that myself, but that's something you might want to look into. And certainly the keys, these two keys right here, the only downside to this is you have to have an actual a computer with you. But if you have a mobile computer that you can take to the field, or maybe spend some time at home with, these, especially these two right here, I can't say enough good things about both of these identification websites. Fantastic tools. And if you've got a few hours to kill on a Sunday, a rainy Sunday where there's nothing else to do, these keys will keep you entertained for hours. And you can probably learn more looking at these dendrology keys than just about any tool. That's probably the single best thing I would encourage you to do if you're just starting out, is take a look at these two links and get familiar with some of the terminology like we talked about, alternate versus opposite, pinnately versus palmately. These two right here will increase your understanding very fast.
Great. We've got a couple more questions here. When hunting, should we set up on the tree we see, the oak tree, or should we set up next to that tree that allows us a good view of the tree dropping acorns?
That's a good question. Typically, when I'm looking for a hunting area, I don't really set up right on the food source. I like to set up a hunting area that's got a combination of factors. I like personally to find an area that has a heavy acorn drop and that might be located near cover as well, because deer, like anything else, loves to be near cover. So if you can get an area that includes cover and food and travel routes between the two, if you find a travel route going from cover to food, I would personally want to be hunting off that travel route a little bit. You don't want to you don't want to disturb them. If you can find those two areas where you've got cover and food real close together, especially if you can find travel routes between the two, set off of that a good distance. That's where your chances are going to be maximized. You set up right on a travel route and disturb them, that decreases your chances a little bit. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. It's not all about the food. Food is hugely beneficial, but look for also don't forget your cover.
All right, and here in the chat box, can you please discuss the advantage of hinge cutting to both provide nutrition at ground level and promote cover?
Sure. Hinge cutting, if you hinge cut a tree, and if you're not quite sure what that is, you're basically taking a chainsaw and making a cut. You're not going all the way through the tree. You're just cutting it enough so that you can drop the tree and it's still connected. Well, that's gonna the green shoots on the end are going to be browsed by lots of different things, including deer. And hinge cutting can, especially less desirable species like for deer at least. I got to be careful when I say less desirable. All species are desirable to something. But sweet gum, for example, they're not generally thought of as a valuable deer species. So a lot of people hinge cut those. Well, the small green shoots can be a good source of nutrition for animals. Now, here, some people take hinge cutting to another level. They will actually plan their hinge cuts so that they funnel deer. If you hinge cut in just the right way, you can actually build small walls and create travel corridors that deer would be more apt to take. So you'll see that some too. You can read about that, hinge cutting, and if you're doing it in the right manner and actually forcing, making small funnels, you can actually funnel wildlife to you. So that's what hinge cutting is, and it can be very beneficial because, yeah, lots of wildlife will eat on the shoots of the trees, and they'll last for quite a while after you hinge cut them.
All right. Any more questions? And let's see, got a couple of people just now joining us. Let's see. Okay, going once, going twice. Any more questions in the chat box? All right. Did you have any final comments, Brian, before I do the wrap up here?
I think we're good. The last thing I'd want to say is just, I think if you take yourself a good field guide to the woods, you'll have a lot more fun than you realize. It is very addictive.
All right, fantastic. And we appreciate Brian being here tonight. This is the second webinar he's done. And as usual, there will be some information in the link for you guys, some documents and things for you to review. And let's see, special thanks to New Hill Education and Mentoring Program and all of the facilitating partners. Watch for a post-webinar email with a link for the materials related to this evening's webinar and a registration link for our next webinar in the series, which will be April 27th, and the webinar will be on hunting regulations. Our speaker will be a Wildlife Resources Commission Enforcement Officer. So if you have any further questions or would like more information on outdoor opportunities, please contact the New Hill Education and Mentoring Program at the link or Facebook page provided. Also, check out ncwf.org to learn more about the Wildlife Federation and to join a local chapter. So thank you so much for the presentation this evening, Brian, and thank you to all who could join us. And so we will stop the recording now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Liz. Take care.